Welcome to the adventure of the Ghost in the Ether, a Sherlock Holmes adventure from the series Holmes and the New Century, the Edwardian Enigmas, playing in the year 1904. My notebooks, long thought lost, contain the untold stories of Sherlock Holmes in the new Edwardian age. While Dr. Watson was increasingly occupied, I had the distinct privilege of documenting Holmes's encounters with the crimes of a modernizing London. Enigmas born of new technologies and shifting social mores. These are the chronicles I intended for his biography. The first of these strange tales I shall relate concerns a mystery of the modern age, a phantom message lost to the ether. It is the singular case I call the adventure of the ghost in the ether. Chapter 1. It is my firm conviction that the new century, this remarkable year of 1904, will be defined not by kings or by conquests, but by the wire and the ether. As a journalist for the Modern Age Chronicle, it was my great privilege to document these marvels, and it was this very work that first brought me into the orbit of Mr. Sherlock Holmes. On a dreary Tuesday in October, with a persistent London rain whispering against the panes of 221B Baker Street, I found myself once more in his singular presence. The familiar sitting room was a bastion against the gloom, a fire, crackling merrily in the grate, casting a warm glow upon the scientific charts and the untidy stacks of monographs. Holmes himself was a study in controlled energy, sunk deep into his armchair, a cloud of tobacco smoke wreathing his sharp aquiline features. The quiet of the afternoon was suddenly shattered by the shrill, insistent peal of the doorbell from downstairs. Its echo had barely faded before we heard the measured tread of Mrs. Hudson ascending the 17 steps, followed by a heavier, more urgent footfall. A moment later, the door swung open to admit a gentleman of some 50 years, tall and impeccably dressed, though his fine overcoat was beaded with rain and his face was pale with a profound anxiety. "Mr. Holmes, I must offer my profound apologies for this intrusion. I am Lord Harrington of the Admiralty. The matter is of the gravest urgency," responded Lord Harrington. His voice was that of a man accustomed to command, yet it was stretched thin with a palpable strain. Holmes uncoiled himself from his chair with a surprising swiftness. "Pray be seated, my lord. Any affair that compels a senior member of the Admiralty to venture out in such a downpour must indeed be of national importance." "You have come, I presume, about the unfortunate business at the Poldhu wireless station," Sherlock Holmes said. Lord Harrington stopped dead, his hand halfway to his waistcoat. His mouth fell slightly agape as he stared at Holmes. "Good heavens, Mr. Holmes, how on earth could you know that?" Lord Harrington answered. "The mud spatter upon your left boot is a reddish clay, quite distinct from London's grime and consistent with that found near the Paddington terminus, from which the Cornish line departs. The faint, sharp scent of ozone that clings to your coat is characteristic of high-voltage electrical apparatus. Couple this with the visible distress of a man responsible for the security of our shores, and the most pressing technological concern of the modern Admiralty becomes the singular, logical conclusion. Now, tell me everything," remarked Sherlock Holmes. Visibly impressed, Lord Harrington sank into the chair Holmes had indicated. He dispensed with all further preamble, his words tumbling out with a controlled desperation. "It concerns a message, Mr. Holmes. A naval communique of the highest strategic importance, containing fleet dispositions. It was transmitted this morning from our station on the coast, destined for the Admiralty via the Marconi receiver at Poldhu," Lord Harrington answered. Holmes nodded slowly, his expression growing more intent. "And it was intercepted? A German trawler, perhaps? The French have also shown a keen interest in Signor Marconi's work." Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. "No. That is precisely the problem, the impossibility of it all. The message was not intercepted. It was not received in a garbled state, nor was it merely delayed," said Lord Harrington. He leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of his chair. His voice dropped to a low, incredulous tone that seemed to fill the silent room. "Mr. Holmes, the message simply vanished," Lord Harrington answered. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending a cascade of sparks up the flue. I confess I stared at the man, my journalistic mind struggling to grasp the concept, for his statement seemed to defy all logic. An electrical signal, a pulse of energy, could not simply cease to be. Vanished? Forgive me, my lord, but how is such a thing possible? Henry Armitage replied. We do not know. Our transmitter confirmed a perfect dispatch. The receiver at Poldhu was fully operational, its operator listening intently. Yet in the 200 miles of ether that lie between them, our communique ceased to exist. It is as if a phantom plucked it from the very air, said Lord Harrington. I glanced at Holmes. The languid mood of the afternoon had evaporated from him entirely. His grey eyes were now alight with that fierce, predatory gleam I had come to know so well. This was no common theft or murder. This was a challenge hurled from the very frontier of science, a ghost in the machine of a new age. The game was afoot. Lord Harrington sat stiffly in the visitor's chair, the firelight glinting on the polished brass buttons of his overcoat. Outside, the November fog pressed against our window panes, muffling the familiar rumble of Baker Street to a distant, ghostly murmur. The silence in our sitting room was profound, broken only by the soft hiss of the gas lamp and the occasional crackle from the hearth. It is not merely that the message was intercepted, Mr. Holmes. Such things, lamentably, are a risk of our profession. No, the situation is far graver. The message, it ceased to exist, responded Lord Harrington. His voice, accustomed to commanding naval fleets, was low and strained. Young Mr. Armitage, the journalist, leaned forward from his seat, his notebook forgotten on his knee. But my lord, is that even possible? My understanding of the Marconi system is that the ether is a medium, not a slate to be wiped clean, Henry Armitage said. That was our understanding as well. The transmission was from a cruiser in the Atlantic to our primary receiving station at Poldhu, in Cornwall. The operator there reported the signal was strong and clear. Then, at the precise moment of transmission, a most peculiar event occurred, answered Lord Harrington. He paused, choosing his words with care. Holmes, who had been examining the ceiling with an air of profound boredom, shifted his gaze. A flicker of interest finally showed in his sharp features. Our man at Poldhu described it as a squall from a clear sky. A sudden violent crackle filled the air. A flash of blue-white light arced directly over the aerials. And then, nothing. The message, which was mid-word, was gone. The atmospheric disturbance vanished as quickly as it had appeared, answered Lord Harrington. I saw the familiar spark ignite in my friend's eyes. The languor fell from him like a discarded cloak. He sat bolt upright, his long fingers steepled before him. A storm, you say? A meteorological event confined to a few hundred yards of Cornish coastline? How very specific. The Admiralty fears a German spy with a clever new receiver. A tedious and unimaginative conclusion. They are looking in the wrong direction entirely, Sherlock Holmes pointed out. I confess, I was as baffled as our guest. From the street below, I could hear a hansom cab's bell tinkling faintly through the thick fog. What other direction is there, Holmes? Wondered Dr. John Watson. Think, Watson. If you wish to prevent a man from hearing a whisper across a quiet room, you might try to cup your ear and intercept it. But a far more effective method is to strike a great brass gong right beside his head. The whisper is not stolen, it is obliterated. This storm was no act of nature. It was the gong, Sherlock Holmes noted. The analogy, as simple as it was startling, hung heavy in the air. Lord Harrington stared, his expression a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. An attack? You believe the wireless transmission itself was deliberately destroyed, Lord Harrington said. Precisely. Not intercepted, but annihilated mid-flight by a directed burst of electrical energy. This is not the work of a common spy. It is the work of a physicist, a scientific rogue. The ghost is not in the machine, gentlemen. "It is a ghost we have created in the ether itself," stated Sherlock Holmes. Holmes sprang from his chair and began to pace before the fire. His movements were charged with a sudden, electric energy that seemed to fill our small quarters. His voice was sharp and decisive. "We are dealing with a new breed of criminal, one who wields lightning as a burglar wields a jimmy. Our investigation, therefore, cannot begin with the Admiralty's hunt for foreign agents. It must begin with the technology. Mr. Armitage, your journalistic assignment for the Chronicle. You are writing a piece on Signor Marconi's marvels, are you not?" Sherlock Holmes noted. "Why, yes. I have an appointment to tour their London offices tomorrow morning," Henry Armitage answered. "Excellent. You shall have 2 companions. We must understand the instrument before we can hope to comprehend the man who found a way to break it," deduced Sherlock Holmes. And so it was settled. As Lord Harrington took his leave, his official anxiety now tinged with a strange new awe, I turned to Holmes. His face was alight with the thrill of the chase. I knew we stood upon the threshold of a mystery unlike any we had faced before. A crime committed not in the grimy alleys of London, but upon the invisible, crackling highways of the modern age. The following morning found us navigating the throng of Fleet Street, the air thick with printing ink and damp fog. Our companion, the journalist Henry Armitage, whose commission provided our pretext, led us to a grand building of Portland stone. Above the polished brass doors, Marconi was carved with a confidence befitting the new century. The rumble of horse-drawn omnibuses outside seemed to belong to another era, a stark contrast to the unseen forces harnessed within. Inside, the lobby was a hive of activity. Messengers darted across the tiled floor, their footsteps echoing sharply. From a deeper part of the building came a persistent, low hum, an electric thrumming that seemed to vibrate in one's very bones. Armitage presented his credentials to a clerk whose starched collar was as stiff as his demeanour. Our journalistic guise proved a sufficient key, and we were soon led into the heart of the machine, the main transmission room. Here the hum was louder, punctuated by the staccato crackle and snap of electricity. Men in shirt-sleeves moved with purpose amidst bewildering arrays of brass coils, glass vacuum tubes glowing with a faint blue light, and panels of vulcanite bristling with switches and dials. The air itself felt charged, and the rhythmic clatter of a dozen telegraph keys provided a constant, metallic chorus to the electrical symphony. Armitage's voice, filled with genuine youthful awe, exclaimed, "It is magnificent, is it not, gentlemen?" "The very nerve centre of the Empire's new voice," Henry Armitage replied. Holmes, however, merely swept the room with a quick, comprehensive glance, his expression intense and analytical. "A voice that can be silenced, it would seem," he murmured, his tone dry. Sherlock Holmes pointed out. A senior manager, eager to impress the press, gestured towards a young operator adjusting a dial with painstaking care. "Mr. Finch here will demonstrate the delicacy of the tuning process. He is one of our most promising junior men." The operator, Alistair Finch, was pale and slight, with a thin moustache that quivered above his lip. As we approached, he started, his hand slipping from the dial with a soft clink of metal on bakelite. Finch offered a weak smile, his eyes darting from Holmes to myself and back again, never quite meeting our gaze. His ink-stained fingers trembled slightly as he gestured towards the receiver. His voice was thin, almost a whisper against the noise of the room. "It is a matter of precise resonance. One must align the receiver's circuit perfectly with the frequency of the incoming signal. The slightest deviation, and the message, it becomes mere noise." "Lost to the ether," said Mr. Alistair Finch. Holmes leaned forward, his expression deceptively mild. "And are such deviations common, Mr. Finch? An atmospheric disturbance, for example. Could that cause a message to be not merely garbled, but to vanish entirely?" observed Sherlock Holmes. At this, a fine sheen of perspiration broke out on Finch's brow. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Incapable of reply, His anxious gaze remained fixed on the silent apparatus before him. I saw Holmes's eyes narrow, his attention shifting from the machinery to fix with hawk-like intensity upon the man. As the manager began to prattle on about signal strength, Holmes turned slightly, and spoke to me in a low undertone, his voice a quiet current beneath the room's electric hum. "Observe him, Watson. That is not the studious concentration of a craftsman. It is the profound terror of a man standing at the scene of his own crime," Sherlock Holmes noted. My friend said no more, but his focus did not waver from the trembling junior operator. The mystery of the ghost in the ether had just acquired a very human and very frightened face. Mr. Alistair Finch stood before us, a man held together by wire and tension. The Marconi office hummed with a low, electric vitality, a constant thrum that vibrated through the floorboards. Against this background hum, the silence between us was absolute. Finch's gaze darted from Holmes to myself, never resting, his fingers twisting the edge of his jacket until his knuckles shone white. "An astonishing business, Mr. Finch, to send a man's thoughts across the void without a physical connection. One must imagine the security required to safeguard such ethereal messages is quite extraordinary," remarked Sherlock Holmes. Holmes adopted a tone of academic curiosity, yet his sharp grey eyes missed nothing of the younger man's discomfort. A fine sheen of perspiration glistened on Finch's brow. It is impregnable, sir. Our encryption methods and transmission frequencies are a closely guarded secret. No one could possibly intercept a message." "It is a scientific impossibility," Mr. Alistair Finch answered. He spoke the words with a brittle confidence, his voice a fraction too high. Holmes tilted his head, a gesture I knew well, like a naturalist observing a curious new specimen. "Impregnable? A fortress without flaw has yet to be constructed, for its architect is always a man. Tell me, is there no professional rivalry in this nascent field? No other great minds who covet Mr. Marconi's success?" Sherlock Holmes said. Finch recoiled as if struck. He swallowed hard, the sound sharp in the quiet room. From the street below, the clatter of a horse-drawn omnibus offered a momentary distraction, but Holmes's attention remained fixed. "There are others, amateurs and dreamers. Men like Signor Varelli, who possess more ambition than sense. His devices are crude, sir, mere toys. He is of no consequence to our operations," Mr. Alistair Finch answered. The dismissal was laced with a peculiar venom, a contempt that felt too personal for a mere competitor. Holmes's expression did not change, but I saw a flicker of intense interest in his eyes. "Signor Marco Varelli, I believe I have read some of his papers. A brilliant theorist on electromagnetic propagation, if I recall, though one whose practical ventures have been plagued by financial misfortune," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. At Holmes's casual recitation of these facts, Finch recoiled as if struck. "He is a failure. The ether is a meritocracy. The best system prevails. Our system," said Mr. Alistair Finch. His voice rose, sharp and strained. With a curt nod, Holmes concluded the interview. We soon found ourselves back on the bustling pavement, the scent of coal smoke and damp London air, a welcome relief from the office's charged atmosphere. I turned to my companion, whose face was a mask of grim satisfaction. "Good heavens, Holmes, the man was practically vibrating with anxiety. What did you make of him?" answered Henry Armitage. "That was not mere anxiety, Armitage. That was the frantic energy of a man guarding a secret he knows to be compromised. His insistence on the system's perfection, his immediate and venomous dismissal of Varelli." "It was a performance," observed Sherlock Holmes. Holmes paused to hail a cab, his gaze distant, as if peering through the London fog to a place unseen. The cabby pulled his horse to a halt with a jingle of harness and a scrape of iron on stone. Finch spoke of meritocracy, yet the communique did not merely fail to arrive. It was erased from the ether itself. "We are investigating the echo of a crime, Armitage," not the source of the sound," declared Sherlock Holmes. He opened the cab door and looked at me, his eyes alight with the fire of the chase. "The message was sent from Poldhu, on the Cornish coast. It is on those wind-swept cliffs that the ghost was made. To Cornwall, Armitage, we must see where the whisper began," stated Sherlock Holmes. "The Great Western Railway carried us through the sleeping countryside, but I doubt my companion saw any of it." Holmes stared out at the passing darkness, his mind clearly leagues ahead of the locomotive, wrestling with the phantom that had snatched a message from the very air. Our destination was the Poldhu wireless station on the Cornish coast, a place as remote and elemental as the mystery itself. As we drew nearer, the gentle hills of England gave way to a starker, more rugged landscape. The very air changed, growing heavy with the salt of the Atlantic, and a ceaseless wind began to press against the carriage window, its low moan a constant companion. Such isolation is a double-edged sword, Watson. It provides security from the common thief, but leaves one utterly exposed to the uncommon one, declared Sherlock Holmes. He murmured the words without turning from the window. When we finally arrived, the station was a lonely outpost against a steel-grey sky. 4 colossal timber masts, stayed with a spider's web of wires, rose from the cliff top, seeming to scrape the low-hanging clouds. The sound of the sea was a percussive roar against the rocks below, and the wind whipped our coats about us as we approached the functional brick building from which the world's most modern magic was conducted. Inside, the air hummed with a palpable energy, a low thrum that vibrated through the floorboards. A haggard-looking chief operator met us, his initial suspicion melting away upon seeing the official letter Holmes produced. He led us to the receiving room, a space dominated by a great table laden with coils, condensers, and the delicate mechanism of the coherer. "You were on duty during the event? Describe the storm to me." "Not as a meteorologist, but as a man who was present," deduced Sherlock Holmes. The operator ran a hand through his already dishevelled hair. His voice was strained, as if reliving a moment of profound shock. "There was no storm I've ever known, sir. There was no rain, no warning, just a single blinding flash of white light that seemed to fill the room, and a sound, a deafening, tearing crackle, like the world's largest spark. Then, silence. The hum of the equipment died for a moment, and the message was simply, 'Gone,'" answered Poldhu station operator. Holmes listened with absolute stillness, his eyes scanning every inch of the room. He bypassed the main apparatus and went directly to the point where the thick aerial cables entered the building through a porcelain insulator. He produced his familiar lens and began a minute examination of the wall and the floor beneath this entry point. After a moment he knelt, and with the tip of a knife, carefully scraped a minuscule quantity of a fine grey powder from the surface of the insulator into a paper envelope. "What is it, Holmes?" "Dust?" wondered Dr. John Watson. He rose to his feet, tapping the envelope thoughtfully. His expression was one of grim satisfaction. "It is the very heart of the matter, my dear Watson. A lightning strike, a natural event, would have left carbon scoring, evidence of immense heat and burning. This, however, is something else entirely. It is a fused metallic dust. This powder is the ghost of a metal conductor, perhaps a filament of some kind, that has been subjected to an instantaneous and colossal surge of electromagnetic energy, vaporizing it in a fraction of a second. This was no act of God, Watson. This was the work of man," stated Sherlock Holmes. The operator stared, his face pale. The notion of a man-made storm, a weapon that could wield such power, was a thing of pure fantasy. Yet Holmes spoke of it as a simple, logical fact. The journey back to London was a thoughtful one. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the track seemed to beat out a new, more urgent tempo. "Our phantom has a scientific mind, Watson, and access to a laboratory of some sophistication. The theory is sound, but I require an expert opinion on the practicalities of constructing such a device." There is only one man in London whose intellect in this specific field might approach the problem with the necessary imagination. We shall call upon Professor Quentin Davies." Holmes fell silent then, lost in his calculations. My own mind, however, turned from the science to the man. I thought of the whispers we had heard at the Marconi offices, of a brilliant rival on the brink of ruin. What might such a man do, I wondered, if driven by professional jealousy and the cold spectre of failure? The Cornish wind seemed to carry the answer, howling a name into the night. The Cornish winds pursued us even to London. Upon our arrival at Paddington, a raw and blustering gale swept the platform. Holmes, however, appeared oblivious to the chill. The metallic dust of Poldhu and the telegram to Professor Davies had ignited a fire within him, his energy, once coastal, now seeking a new outlet in the city's heart. "There is no time to await the professor's reply, Watson. His work is in the realm of theory. Ours is in the grimy world of fact. We must pursue the human element. A crime of this technological sophistication requires a mind of equal caliber, a mind, perhaps, warped by jealousy," replied Sherlock Holmes. Our hunt began at once. Holmes led us into the hushed confines of a dusty library, where the silence was broken only by the dry rustle of turning pages. He directed our search to the financial ledgers and trade journals of the past 2 years, his long, thin fingers flying through indexes with frightening precision. Here we are, Varelli Electrotelegraphy. Note the share price, Watson. A steady, then precipitous decline. The man is not merely struggling, he is on the very brink of financial ruin, declared Sherlock Holmes. He tapped a column of figures in a well-thumbed copy of the Financial Times. The evidence was stark. Signor Marco Varelli, Marconi's most outspoken rival, was facing utter collapse. Leaving the hushed libraries, we proceeded to a central telegraph office, the air thick with the incessant, chattering rhythm of the machines, a constant metallic patter, a frantic conversation carried on wires that spanned the globe. Holmes, employing a subtle pretext I did not fully comprehend, engaged a senior clerk in conversation, his questions weaving a complex web around Varelli's recent business communications. Though he learned little of substance, the clerk's shrugs and dismissive tones spoke volumes of Varelli's diminished standing in the industry. "So Holmes, a rival with a powerful motive. Desperation can drive a man to extreme measures," Dr. John Watson inquired. "It is the most potent accelerant for crime known to man, my dear fellow. But desperation alone does not build the instrument of destruction. We have motive, but we lack the man. We must know more of Varelli himself, beyond the balance sheets," declared Sherlock Holmes. To learn more of the man himself, we returned to the library's reference section, consulting the great leather-bound tomes of biographical dictionaries. It was there, amidst a dry recitation of Varelli's patents and business ventures, that Holmes made an intriguing discovery. He let out a low hum of satisfaction. "Have you found something of importance?" wondered Dr. John Watson. "Something of profound interest. Listen to this, Watson. Signor Varelli, despite his scientific preoccupations, is also an amateur musician and composer of some little note, having had a sonata for cello and piano performed at the Aeolian Hall last spring." "A composer, Watson," Sherlock Holmes noted. "I confess I saw little relevance in the detail. A man's hobbies seemed a world away from a matter of national security and electromagnetic sabotage. An interesting trifle, perhaps, but surely it has no bearing on our case," commented Dr. John Watson. Holmes closed the heavy book with a soft thud that echoed in the quiet room. His eyes shone with that familiar, intense light, which always preceded a leap of deduction. "On the contrary, it has every bearing. We are searching for a man who can manipulate invisible waves in the ether. Music, my dear Watson, is precisely that. The masterful organization of vibrations in the air to produce a specific, calculated effect. The mind that can compose a sonata is a mind that understands harmony, frequency, and resonance. It is the very same order of thinking. We are no longer looking for a ruined inventor. We are looking for a ruined composer," deduced Sherlock Holmes. He stood, His course of action suddenly clear. The trail of ledgers and share prices had come to an end. Our next inquiry must be into the man's private life. We must see where such a mind lives and works. We shall pay a visit to Signor Varelli's lodgings, Sherlock Holmes said. Signor Varelli, a man ostensibly dedicated to the cold science of wireless telegraphy, was also a passionate musician. This revelation had ignited a peculiar fire in my friend. Our handsome cab rattled over slick cobblestones, the horse's hooves beating a tattoo of anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of wet coal smoke and London's perpetual dampness. A man's hobbies, Watson, are often more revealing than his profession. In his work, he presents the face the world expects. In his leisure, he reveals the mind that lies beneath, deduced Sherlock Holmes. Our young companion, Henry Armitage, had secured the interview. The journalist proposed an article on the intersection of art and science, a topic perfectly tailored to flatter our quarry's ego. We soon drew up before a tall, narrow townhouse, its brick facade stained dark by soot. From an upper window drifted the faint, melancholic strain of a cello, a lonely sound quickly swallowed by the city's drone. Signor Varelli's rooms were a testament to his divided soul. The space was a chaotic symphony of wires, glass vacuum tubes and brass fittings. These scientific instruments were jumbled amidst stacks of sheet music and learned volumes on harmonic theory. A cello leaned in one corner, its polished wood gleaming in the gaslight. The floorboards groaned under our feet, and the air carried a curious mingling of rosin and the sharp, metallic scent of ozone. It is a fascinating paradox, Signor, to be at the forefront of etheric communication, and yet so devoted to the classical disciplines, answered Henry Armitage, while Armitage engaged the inventor, drawing him out with well-aimed questions about his compositions. Holmes prowled the room. His eyes, sharp and grey as a winter sky, missed nothing as he drifted from a workbench laden with strange instruments to a bookshelf groaning under the weight of technical manuals. My own gaze was drawn to a writing desk, submerged beneath a tidal wave of paper. There, half hidden under a diagram of a spark gap transmitter, lay a concert program, its margins furiously annotated with a scrawl of musical notation. I saw Holmes notice it at the same instant. His posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. He moved closer to the desk, keeping his back to Varelli. As he feigned interest in a framed schematic on the wall, his long fingers hovered near the prize. Then, with a sudden, apparently clumsy gesture, his elbow caught a towering stack of loose musical scores perched precariously on the desk's edge. The cascade was immediate, a great flurry of paper filling the air, whispering and rustling as it settled across the floor. Varelli gave a cry of dismay and rushed forward, Armitage quick to assist him in gathering the scattered sheets. In that single chaotic moment, I saw Holmes's hand, swift and sure as a striking snake, dart out and pluck the program from the desk. It vanished into the deep pocket of his coat. My profound apologies, Signor. A moment of unforgivable carelessness. Allow me, replied Sherlock Holmes. He stooped to help, his expression a perfect mask of contrition. The incident served to break the spell of the interview. Within minutes we were making our farewells and descending the creaking staircase. Once back in the cab, the sounds of the street rushed in around us. Armitage was alight with the success of his interview, utterly oblivious to the silent drama that had unfolded. Holmes, however, was quiet, his gaze distant, one hand resting protectively over the contents of his pocket. "You found something, Holmes?" responded Dr. John Watson. A thin smile touched his lips, but he did not look at me. The cab lurched forward, its wheels grinding against the curb. "Perhaps, Watson. It is a composition of a most curious sort. We shall study its arrangement more closely at Baker Street," Sherlock Holmes said. The familiar comfort of our Baker Street lodgings was a welcome tonic against the damp chill of the London streets. A steady November rain whispered against the window panes, its gentle patter joining the hiss of the gaslight and the soft crackle of the fire in the grate. I had settled into my armchair, content to observe my friend, but Holmes showed no signs of repose. He paced before the hearth, his tall, gaunt figure casting a restless shadow upon the wall, his mind still prowling the cluttered rooms of the Italian inventor. "Watson, you recall our brief but illuminating visit to the lodgings of Signor Varelli?" replied Sherlock Holmes. "I am not likely to forget it," I replied dryly. "I recall your rather audacious appropriation of his property, Holmes." "A considerable risk, should he have discovered the theft?" asked Dr. John Watson. He waved a dismissive hand, his mind already far beyond such trivial concerns as legality. From the inner pocket of his coat, he produced the very item in question, the concert program. The paper was thin, its surface creased from its hasty concealment. He laid it carefully upon the table, precisely beneath the bright cone of light from our lamp. "A risk worth taking is no risk at all, but a calculated investment," he said, his voice sharp and precise. "And this, my dear fellow, is the dividend." "Look here," Sherlock Holmes said. I leaned forward, my gaze following his long, tapering finger as it came to rest. It pointed not to the printed details of the Wagnerian performance, but to the wide margin of the page. There, scrawled in faint pencil, was a short line of musical notation, a treble clef followed by a dozen or so notes, their forms crude and hurried. "I see it, Holmes. It appears to be a few bars of some melody that caught his fancy during the performance. The man is a musician, after all." "It is hardly surprising," responded Dr. John Watson. A thin smile touched my companion's lips. He tapped the paper with his fingernail, the small, sharp sound stark in the quiet room. Is it a melody, Watson? Observe the composition. It is crude, is it not? Almost childish in its simplicity. It possesses no harmonic grace, no logical progression. "It is a clumsy and dissonant little phrase," observed Sherlock Holmes. I studied the notes again, conceding his point. He was right, of course. The sequence was jarring and random, a composition that would offend the ear of even the most amateur musician. Would a man of Varelli's evident musical sensibilities, a man whose rooms are filled with the masterworks of the ages, commit such an amateurish scrawl to paper? It is an affront to the very principles of his art. Therefore, we must ask ourselves a new question. "If it is not music, then what is it?" declared Sherlock Holmes. He fell silent, but his eyes remained fixed upon the program, burning with an intensity that sent a familiar thrill of anticipation through me. Where I saw only a meaningless doodle, a fragment of a forgotten tune, Holmes was on the precipice of a discovery. He was hearing a different kind of music entirely, a silent symphony of conspiracy and high treason, played out in pencil upon a concert bill. The fire in the Baker Street hearth cast a dancing, unsteady light upon the concert program spread across the table between us. Outside, the low rumble of a late-night omnibus faded into the damp London air, leaving only the soft crackle of the coals and the frantic ticking of the mantelpiece clock. I confess my own disappointment was growing. The scrawled musical notes seemed a dead end, a meaningless doodle born of boredom. Holmes, however, was a study in coiled energy. He had ceased his restless pacing, and now stood, chin upon hand, staring down at the paper. A low hum of concentration, the unmistakable prelude to some extraordinary mental feat, emanated from him. Suddenly his finger stabbed down upon the page, the nail making a sharp little tap against the paper. "You see a melody, Armitage. You are a man of letters, not of music, and so you hear with your eyes." "But you are looking for the wrong thing," replied Sherlock Holmes. "I see only a clumsy and discordant arrangement," I admitted. "It has no harmony, no discernible tune," remarked Henry Armitage. "Precisely," he exclaimed, his voice sharp with triumph. "That is the very point. Signor Varelli is a man steeped in the Italian tradition of music. Why would he scribble a composition so utterly devoid of grace? It is an insult to the art. Unless, of course, it is not music at all," Sherlock Holmes responded. He snatched up a pencil from the clutter on the mantelpiece and returned to the table. His grey eyes burned with a feverish light. "Listen not to the notes, my dear fellow, but to their duration. The rhythm, the cadence, this longer note, the crotchet, and this shorter one, the quaver. Do you not see a pattern emerging?" declared Sherlock Holmes. He began to tap the pencil upon the polished mahogany, his movements swift and precise, a long, resonant beat, then 2 sharp, quick ones. A pause. Then 3 more, rapid and distinct. It was a staccato and unfamiliar rhythm, yet undeniably structured. The sharp, insistent sound echoed in the quiet room. A long sound and a short sound. A dash and a dot. "It is the language of the ether itself, Armitage. It is Morse code, transcribed for the eye of a musician." A gasp escaped my lips. The sheer, brilliant simplicity of it was staggering. Holmes pushed aside the program and drew a clean sheet of foolscap towards him. The scratching of his pen nib was the only sound as his long fingers flew across the page, translating the musical notation into letters with astonishing speed. After a moment of profound silence, he pushed the paper across to me. His voice was low and grim as he read the words aloud, the irrefutable proof of his deduction. "To Admiralty. HMS. Invincible. Proceed to rendezvous point 34. Await further instruction. Utmost secrecy imperative. Ends," observed Sherlock Holmes. I stared at the words. The very text of the stolen naval communique, miraculously drawn from a few seemingly meaningless musical scribbles. It was not merely an interception. It was a perfect copy, transcribed by a skilled operator before the original was utterly destroyed. "My God, Holmes," I breathed, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. "Then Varelli," answered Henry Armitage. His expression was hard as granite. "The cipher is the man. Who else possesses the singular combination of talents? An expert in wireless telegraphy, and a man to whom music is a second language. He has not only committed the crime, he has signed his name to it, in the most ingenious fashion imaginable. We have him, Armitage. We have him," Sherlock Holmes responded. Holmes threw down his pencil upon the table. The deciphered naval communique, lying stark and undeniable upon the foolscap, the last note of the phantom melody, had yielded its secret. For a moment, the only sound in our sitting room was the soft hiss of the gaslight and the distant, mournful cry of a tugboat on the fog-shrouded Thames. "My word, Holmes, that music could conceal such a message. It quite beggars belief," Henry Armitage said. "It is a signature, my dear Armitage. And it is one that points to a single individual in all of London," declared Sherlock Holmes. He sprang up from his chair, his tall, gaunt frame radiating a nervous energy that seemed to charge the very air around him. He began to pace before the hearth, his slippered feet making no sound upon the thick rug. "Consider the facts. Our culprit must possess a profound and practical knowledge of wireless telegraphy, enough to rival Marconi himself. He must also have the artistic temperament and specific skill to conceive of such an elegant cipher. A musical one. Who do we know with a foot in both the world of science and the world of the concert hall? A man perhaps driven by professional jealousy, whose own ventures are failing," declared Sherlock Holmes. "Varelli? But the man is a celebrated artist, not an engineer." "It seems impossible," remarked Henry Armitage. "Precisely. The game is afoot, and the scent is hot. Armitage, you have been an invaluable guide in this technological labyrinth. Now we require the arm of the law. I shall dispatch a wire to Scotland Yard at once," remarked Sherlock Holmes. Within the hour, the heavy tread of Inspector Lestrade could be heard upon our stair, and soon the squat, determined figure of the detective stood before us, his bulldog face set in a grim expression. Holmes laid out the case with a speed and clarity that left the inspector blinking. "A musical code, you say? And you're certain it's this Italian fellow, Varelli?" "It sounds dashed peculiar, Holmes," Inspector Lestrade answered. Peculiarity is the province of the master criminal, Lestrade. We have reason to believe his workshop is a disused warehouse in Lambeth, near the river. We must move quickly, before he can dismantle his apparatus or dispose of the evidence," explained Sherlock Holmes. Our hansom cab rattled over the cobblestones, plunging into the grimy warren of streets that huddled by the south bank of the Thames. The air grew thick with the smell of coal smoke and damp brick, and the rhythmic clang of a distant forge provided a percussive accompaniment to our journey. We alighted before a grim, soot-stained building, its windows boarded and its great wooden doors barred. A low, almost imperceptible hum emanated from within, a deep thrumming that resonated in the bones more than it registered upon the ear. "Right then. Stand back," answered Inspector Lestrade. With a guttural command from Lestrade, two of his constables put their shoulders to the door. The wood groaned in protest, then gave way with a great splintering crack. We burst into the vast, cavernous space, the air thick with the sharp, metallic scent of ozone, the sudden silence within, broken only by our heavy boots. In the center of the room, illuminated by the harsh glare of a single, naked electric bulb, stood a monstrous contraption of brass coils, glass vacuum tubes, and gleaming copper wire. And beside it, his face a mask of astonishment and terror, stood Signor Marco Varelli. "You! How did you?" Signor Marco Varelli answered. "Your symphony is concluded, signor. There will be no encore," stated Sherlock Holmes. The workshop air was thick, with the scent of ozone and hot metal, a strange electric tang that prickled the senses. Before us stood Signor Varelli, his back to a monstrous contraption of brass coils and glowing vacuum tubes that emitted a low, predatory hum. His fine suit seemed out of place amidst the grime and clutter, and though he was cornered, his posture was not one of fear, but of a performer caught moments before his grand debut. Inspector Lestrade shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the sound of his boots scraping on the concrete floor, the only sharp noise above the machine's pervasive hum. "You have a flair for the dramatic, signor. But the overture is over," Sherlock Holmes noted. Holmes's voice, though not raised, cut through the machine's drone with absolute authority. He produced the transcribed musical cipher from his pocket, holding it out, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact, a fascinating composition. It required a man of singular talents, one with an ear for music, a mind for ciphers, and a profound, if tragically misguided, understanding of Hertzian waves. There is only one such man in all of London, Sherlock Holmes pointed out. Varelli's eyes darted from Holmes's face to the sheet of music, his defiant shoulders slumped in weary resignation. A dry, rasping sound, a hollow imitation of a laugh, escaped his lips. "So, the ghost has sung its tune to you, has it, Mr. Holmes? You are cleverer than Marconi's fools. They searched the air for a thief, but they never thought to listen for an echo," Signor Marco Varelli said. "Enough of this riddle talk, Varelli. You'll explain yourself, and this infernal machine," Inspector Lestrade replied. Varelli waved a dismissive hand towards the inspector, his attention fixed on Holmes. A strange flicker of pride touched his voice as he gestured towards the glowing apparatus behind him. "This is not a machine of theft, Inspector. It is a work of art. It performs two functions in a single beautiful instant. You see these primary coils? With a precisely timed jolt of power, they generate a focused electromagnetic wave, a phantom lightning storm aimed directly at the Poldu receiving mast," said Signor Marco Varelli. Animation lit his features, the inventor's passion for his creation momentarily eclipsing his predicament. To their instruments, the air is filled with an impossible surge of static. The real message is drowned, overwhelmed, effectively erased from existence before it can even be recorded. It becomes a ghost in the ether, a whisper lost in a hurricane of my own making, Signor Marco Varelli said. Holmes nodded slowly, his gaze analytical as he surveyed the device. "A brilliant method of erasure," but destruction was only half of the equation. "You still required the message yourself," observed Sherlock Holmes. "Precisely. And that is the true genius." "Observe," Signor Marco Varelli replied. He pointed to a smaller, self-contained unit set apart from the main coils, encased in a thick cage of lead and copper mesh. "My own receiver. Shielded, you see. Utterly immune to the tempest I unleash. While Marconi's men hear only noise, my delicate instrument, sitting in the calm eye of the storm, plucks the message from the air as cleanly as a harpist plucks a string. I erase, and I record in the same breath," replied Signor Marco Varelli. A heavy silence fell upon the workshop, the machine's hum seeming to swell in triumph. It was a crime of breathtaking ingenuity, a theft leaving no trace but an inexplicable burst of static. "You were hired, of course. This device is too powerful, its purpose too specific for mere professional jealousy. The Dynamo Gang, I presume," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. At Holmes's question, the inventor's pride vanished, replaced by the sour reality of his bargain. Varelli's face hardened, and his voice dropped to a low, bitter tone. "They have the money. I have the genius. It was a simple transaction, but my work would have been for naught without the transmission schedules." "For that, they had their man on the inside," answered Signor Marco Varelli. "The nervous young operator. Mr. Alistair Finch," declared Sherlock Holmes. "The very same. A weak man, crippled by debt, easily persuaded. He was their key. I was merely their instrument," answered Signor Marco Varelli. With the confession complete, the energy seemed to drain from the room. Lestrade stepped forward, his constables close behind. The resonant hum of the great machine died, with a sudden click, as an officer found the main switch, plunging the workshop into a profound and sudden quiet. The ghost at last was silenced. The familiar chaos of 221B Baker Street seemed a comforting anchor after the stark metallic world of wireless technology we had just inhabited. A healthy fire roared in the grate, its cheerful crackle a stark contrast to the electric hum of Varelli's infernal machine. With the case concluded, and the culprits now in the hands of Scotland Yard, all that remained was the story. I sat opposite my host, my notebook open upon my knee, the nib of my pen poised to capture it. "If you would, Mr. Holmes, for the sake of my article and my own understanding, could you recount the entire affair from its inception?" "From the moment the ghost first entered the ether," Henry Armitage said. Holmes steepled his long fingers, his grey eyes fixed upon the heart of the fire. When he began to speak, his voice shed its usual sharp impatience, adopting the measured cadence of a university lecturer, as if addressing a class. "The problem was never a simple interception, Armitage. That was the fundamental error in the military's thinking. They imagined a listening post, a spy with a receiver, but the communique did not merely fail to arrive. It was, for all intents and purposes, erased from existence during its journey. It vanished in a so-called electrical storm that affected nothing but the Marconi Company's apparatus." "A storm with a witness, but no rain," replied Sherlock Holmes. He paused, allowing the impossibility of it to hang in the air between us. The ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece filled the silence, each second marking the progress of an age I was only just beginning to comprehend. Nature does not operate with such specific malice. This was the work of a man who could create a ghost. Signor Varelli, a genius embittered by Marconi's success, was that man. He did not simply listen to the transmission, he attacked it. His device generated a focused burst of electromagnetic energy, a miniature, man-made lightning strike aimed directly at the receiver. This created the ghost storm, a wall of static so violent it overwhelmed the delicate incoming signal, scrambling it into meaningless noise. I scribbled furiously, the scratching of my pen providing a frantic accompaniment to his calm explanation. The sheer audacity of the concept took my breath away, but in doing so, He would have destroyed the message for himself as well, said Henry Armitage. Precisely the conclusion the authorities reached. But Varelli's brilliance lay in the dual nature of his machine. While one part of it broadcast chaos, another part, a secondary receiver, heavily shielded and tuned to the precise frequency, was quietly listening. It sat within the eye of its own hurricane, capturing the message perfectly, even as the official instrument was deafened by the roar. A truly elegant solution, to steal and destroy the evidence of the theft in a single invisible act, Sherlock Holmes noted. He leaned back, the firelight glinting in his eyes. Holmes had moved on from the mechanics of the crime to its heart. Of course, Varelli was only the instrument. The Dynamo Gang, our true quarry, are a new breed. They did not need to know how the machine worked, only that it did. They found two brilliant men and weaponized their flaws. They used Signor Varelli's professional jealousy and Mr. Finch's desperate need for money to turn the very air into their private lockbox. They committed a robbery without a single jemmy or firearm. I set down my pen, a sudden chill creeping over me that had nothing to do with the winter evening outside. A hansom cab rattled past on the street below, the sound of its horse's hooves on the cobblestones evoking a bygone era. It is a terrifying prospect, Mr. Holmes. A new age of crime, conducted by ghosts of technology, Henry Armitage answered. Holmes offered a thin, mirthless smile. He rose and stood by the window, looking out into the foggy London night, where the gas lamps glowed like captured stars. The tools of the trade may evolve, Armitage. The ether may replace the dark alleyway as the criminal's hunting ground. But the motives remain unchanged. Greed, envy, desperation. These are the timeless engines of villainy. Our task, as it has always been, is simply to adapt our methods, to ensure that there is no darkness, not even an invisible, technological one, into which the law cannot shine a light, remarked Sherlock Holmes,